Okay, we're just going to look at how we simplify square roots that we'll see several times in this course. So obviously, if we know square roots, there are a lot of numbers that have very nice square roots. For example, the square root of 4 is just 2. And the square root of 9 is 3, because 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 3 is 9. Now, any number in between 4 and 9 is going to have a not nice square root. It's going to have an irrational number. So what we'd have to do is we're going to try to simplify those. So I'm going to continue to write my list of perfect square roots. Generally speaking, if you get up into the 10 area, you're pretty okay. So I'm just going to write them all up until 10. And we'll try to simplify from here. So those are my perfect square roots. And those aren't very difficult to come up with because I just take 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, 6 squared, 7 squared, 8 squared, 9 squared, and 10 squared. And those are my nice roots. So when I have numbers that are in between these, in between 4 and 9, in between 9 and 16, in between 16 and 25, our goal is to make the stuff under the root as small as possible. So that's what we'll try to do when we simplify square roots. So these are all examples that have that are numbers that are not perfect squares, but I'd like to simplify it because we'd love to make this number under the root symbol. We'd love to make that as small as possible. So if you think about it, we want to think about which of the numbers from our previous list would be best to divide into this. So if you remember, we had 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100. So I want to know what's the biggest number on this list that would divide into 75. And in this case, I'm pretty confident it is 25. So square root of 25 times square root of 3. Because 75 is simply 25 times 3. Now the reason this is beneficial, the square root of 25 is simply 5. So this becomes 5 times the square root of 3. So I can always tell that I have done it completely because if I look at the 3, none of these numbers divide into 3. So as long as that's small enough that none of these divide into it, I've done it correctly and I've done it completely. So when I look at 18, 18 is also kind of a simple one because it's not a perfect square, but I see 9 divides into 18, so 18 is square root of 9, square root of 2. And then the square root of 9 is a nice number. When you simplify, one will be nice and one will be not. So this one is nice and this one is not. Now when I go to 30, 30 is kind of an interesting one. So 30 doesn't divide by 4, 30 doesn't divide by 9, 30 doesn't divide by 16, 30 doesn't divide by 25. So none of these numbers that we have over here divide into 30. So in cases like this, this is just my answer. It does not simplify. So radical 30 does not simplify any further. So radical 30 is just simply radical 30. It doesn't simplify at all. And there are lots of numbers that do that. Any of the numbers that don't divide by one of these will be of that case. Now 28 does not fall in that category because 28 divides by the first one because 28 is 4 times 7. And again, I would just start with the smaller numbers and kind of go up the list. And then the square root of 4 is 2, so you have one nice number and one number that stays in the root. Very, very similar. Let's just look at a couple other ones. So we have 150. So I'm going to go ahead and write my list again on this page. 1, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100. So the one I see for sure that divides into 150 is 25. I could try to look for some bigger ones. Does 150 divide by 36 or 49 or 64 or 100? But it doesn't. The biggest I have is 25. So that's 25 times 6 because 150 divided by 25 is 6. And then again, 1's going to turn out very nice. 5, and then square root of 6. And again, I can tell if I look at the 6, nothing divides into that, so that's still good. Now 108 is kind of a tricky one because 108 can divide by lots of them. 108 divides by 4, 108 divides by 9, 108 does not divide by 16 or 25, but it also divides by 36. And I'm simply just getting that I could just use a calculator. 108 divided by 4, 108 divided by 9, 108 divided by 36. I could keep going, but 36 is the biggest. The square root of 108 is 36 times 3. And so this is 6 root 3. And again, I got one nice number and then one nice number that has no squares or perfect squares that would go into it. All right, we have 98 and 243, a couple other ones. So 98, if I look at this list, 98 actually has a weird square. It's one we haven't seen yet. 98 actually divides by 49. It is 49 and 2. And again, you just take 98 and you start dividing these numbers. Square root of 49 is nice. It's 7, and then I have the 2. So 7 square root of 2. So sometimes you have to go all the way up there. Like for the last one here, the one that actually works is 81. It's 81 and 3. And you could just keep dividing, right? 243 divided by 4, 9, 16, 25. It would actually divide by 9, but I want to keep going until I get to the biggest one, which is 81. So that's going to be 9 square root of 3. So the big thing is trying to use this list of this list of perfect squares, and just try to see which one would divide into it so you can simplify the number under your root.